He reached the birch forest before dawn, dismounting and leading his buckskin gelding through the grey shapes of the trees to the far side, to the edge of the meadow that reached to the slope where Tanner's lookouts were stationed. The night was clear and there was no sign of life on the hill, but they would be there. He was sure. How many? He would have to wait and see. Hello BookTube, my name is David, and for June on the Range I thought I'd kick it off with Valdez is Coming by Elmore Leonard. Now this book starts off with that classic western scene of a stakeout. There's a posse surrounding a small shack that contains an alleged murderer. And it's here that we're introduced to both our hero, Valdez, and the man who will become the villain, Tanner. Now, Elmore Leonard has got a really nice writing style for this kind of book. It's terse, it's to the point, it's not overly flowery, but it gives you a great sense of who everyone is, what they're about, and the land around. And he does it with a great kind of economical use of language. So Tanner is introduced in the first few pages as follows. The man there in the dark suit, thin and bony, not especially big, but looking like he was made of gristle and hard to kill, with a mustache and a thin nose and a dark, dusty hat worn over his eyes. That was him. They had heard about Frank Tanner, but not many had ever seen him. He had a place south in the foothills of the Santa Ritas, and almost to the border. They said he had an army riding with him, Americans and Mexicans, and his place was like a barracks except for the women. They said he traded horses and cattle and guns across into Mexico to the revolutionary forces, and he had all the riders in case the federales came down on him. Also in case his customers ever decided not to pay. So right from the outset, we get a sense of who this person is. This is not a good person, I think we can say, even by the standards of the Old West. But the stakeout ends quite tragically, and our man Valdez feels incredibly guilty over what's happened and seeks some kind of justice for the kind of surviving victim. Ostensibly he's trying to make right, but there's actually something more going on. In fact, pretty soon we get the sense he doesn't really care about the victim. It's something else that's driving him on, and we slowly learn about a much more violent past, and that this is through actions and decisions that occurred at the stakeout, this kind of comes back to him, and that he has to seek his vengeance, and that he kind of almost feels sorry for the villain. This kind of single-minded hero is coming after you. First he's looking for a kind of compensation for the victim and kind of an appeal to mere law, but that soon changes once the book turns quite violent, and we get our more classic Western cowboy figure. The book itself climaxes in again in that classic Western scene in a desolate bad land. Our hero surrounded, being chased and pursued, and you think he's it's all going to come to an end. That though you kind of get the sense, well, it's going to resolve itself in a fairly normal way, and as the pages kind of get closer and closer to the end, you think, well, maybe what is going to happen here? And Elmore Leonard doesn't just hand us an ending. He serves up something much more tense and ultimately satisfying. It's a very clever way of doing it. It keeps this high tension of begins with the stakeout, it ends with the stakeout, and that kind of heady pace continues throughout the book. It's a relatively short novel. I think comes in maybe 160, 170 pages. I read it on Kindle, so it's kind of hard to keep a track of these things. but our man Leonard really knows what he's doing. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to reading more of his books. The prose itself is sparing and shows, yeah, and shuns ornamentation. I will say all the characters are a lot more complex. A lot is fit into this quite short novel. You know, our villains are villainous, to be sure, but you also understand why they're behaving in this way. In some ways, you think, well, how could they possibly behave in a different way? You know, some of them have been put in a situation where, well, if they don't do the villainous action, then there's no future for them. Or they would lose the respect of the people around them. Even our heroes, thinking of the horse breaker, who is extremely heroic, but himself a very violent and dangerous man. Valdez, as I've alluded to before, has a very dark past. I'm not going to give any, and I'm going to try not to give much away, because I highly encourage you to read this book if you haven't. It's short, it's fast paced, it has goodies who are good most of the time, it has baddies who are bad but understandable. It cuts across quite a lot of themes: greed, murder, prostitution, domestic abuse. These are, it's an extremely rich and complex short novel. I hadn't read any Elmore Leonard before. I think I had this one on my Kindle when I bought a pile of Elmore Leonard books that were going cheap on some deal on Amazon. I read a lot on Kindle, so this was, every so often just pick up some things that are on sale. And really glad I did, and really looking forward to reading more of his books. The writing itself is phenomenal. It never gets too flowery. I think one of the more flowery passages would be lost on me now. One of the more flowery passages, but one that gives you kind of a sense of the writing without giving away much of the plot. It's from chapter 4. So Valdez is now in the desert. He has been tortured. He's left for dead, and he says, sorry, I got interrupted there, and I thought I'd correct my posture and maybe read it again. St. Francis of Assisi was the kindest man who ever lived. Maybe not kinder than our Lord, that was different, but kinder than any real living man. Sure, St. Francis had been a soldier once and got wounded, and after that he wouldn't step on bugs or kill animals. Hell, he talked to the animals. Like the time he talked to the wolf, probably a big grey lobo who was scaring everyone, and he told the wolf to stop it. Stop it or I'll skin you, you son of a bitch, and wear you for a coat. You would talk to a wolf different than you would talk to other animals. But he talked to all of them, birds, everything. They were all his friends, he said. He even talked to the stars and the sun and the moon. He called the sun brother sun. But not today. You couldn't call it brother sun, Bob Valdez thought. It was strange the things he thought about, lying in the meadow on a pole, like a man crucified, remembering his older sister reading to him a long time ago about St. Francis of Assisi and his prayer, or whatever it was, the Canticle of the Sun. Yes, because he had pictured the sun moving, spinning and doing things, the sun smiling, as his sister read it to him. Today the sun filled the sky and had no edges. It wasn't smiling. This day the sun was everything over him, white hot pressing down on him and dancing orange, red and black dots on his closed eyelids. He remembered a man who had no eyelids, who'd been staked out in the sun and his eyelids cut off, and his ears cut off also, and his right hand. He remembered finding the man's hand and finding the man's son in the burned out farmhouse on the Gila River south of San Carlos, after Geronimo jumped the reservation and raided down into old Mexico. Like there you get a sense of the book, you know, going from, you know, this kind of sublime St. Francis to like this extremely violent, you know, scene of war and carnage. And again, that's about as flowery as it gets. Most of the book is like straight to the point. There's actually a tremendous amount of dialogue, and I did find that Elmore Leonard was particularly good at the dialogue. At every point, I knew who was talking. They had their own, they very much had their own unique voice, even when there was like multiple characters cutting across each other or involved in a conversation. I found it very easy to follow who was who. You could tell from the motivation, from the way they spoke, the words they used. Yeah, extremely talented writer. I'm really looking forward to reading more of his books, both westerns and non-westerns. I think, again, like one of the great things about this book was just how much he managed to fit in. One slight criticism I'd have, and I couldn't really call it a criticism at that, is the name. Valdez is Coming. It's a fantastic name, brilliant name for a western, evocative. You know who you care about, or you know who's an important character right from the get-go. But he doesn't really. He's more going than coming. He's more running somewhere else than actually coming towards anyone. I think there's maybe two pivotal moments where he's going to somewhere. All the rest he's running away. So, but Valdez is Going is a very different book, and I think whoever came up with the title, presumably Elmore Leonard, they knew what they were doing. I wouldn't change that, but I think it's worth it. was the one small thing I found about it. There are kind of unsurprising for a western of the time. There's not a huge amount of women in it, but the ones that are really fantastic. Own masters of their own destiny. They do take control of situations that they're in, with maybe the exception. Well, yeah, no, I'd say even the person to whom Valdez is trying to make restitution. Although you've obviously, as I've said before, he doesn't particularly care, and I think that woman doesn't particularly care either. She is around for the first chapter or two and then just disappears. No one knows where she is, where she's gone, why anyone would care about her. In fact, towards the end, Valdez even says he can't remember her face. It really drives home that what he is seeking retribution for is not what has occurred, but what has changed within him, what he's trying to make right, what the series of events that Tanner has set about, which caused Valdez to take a particular action, which returned him to this life of violence, which he's clearly fallen back into again. This is a really, really terrific book, and yeah, highly recommend it. Highly, highly recommend it. I look forward to reading some more of Elmore Leonard's novels, as I've said. Hope to read a few more for June on the Range. I think it'll be a lot of fun. Hopefully this video has been interesting. I hope you've enjoyed it, and yeah, I hope I haven't coughed too much. And yeah, thanks for your time. See you. Bye.